The time is precisely 1:15 p.m. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. News edited by Ramesh Piris and read by Chandima Virakon. Headlines. The President expresses concern over diplomat statements on removal of protesters from the Presidential Secretariat. The EU urges the new interim government to work in full compliance with GSP Plus commitments. The government to begin preliminary discussions with party leaders to form an all-party government in the future. The Ministry of Education says government and government-approved private schools in Colombo district to resume tomorrow, limited to 3 days a week. All schools in the southern province to function on all 5 days. The Director General of the RDA says the daily revenue generated by highways down by 70%. More than 2,500 pilgrims on Padayatra journeying on foot from the north to east to attend the Katragama Asala festival. On international news, US condemns Russian missile attack on Odessa. In sports, it's cricket. Sri Lanka elects to bat first in the second test at Galle. 19 years old Valalage makes his test debuts. Local stories in detail. President Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday evening invited the Colombo-based diplomats to the President's office, during which unofficial concerns were raised over their statements released over the operations carried out by the security forces to clear the Presidential Secretariat area. President Wickremesinghe had briefed the diplomats over the military operation and informed them that protesters continue to occupy the area despite a court order, and they continue to occupy the Presidential Secretariat illegally. President Wickremesinghe also requested the diplomats to check with the relevant officials when making statements, as statements based on social media reports alone could damage Sri Lanka's image globally, especially at a time when Sri Lanka needed assistance from friendly nations to recover from the economic crisis. The Council of the European Union has urged Sri Lanka's new interim government to uphold the freedom of opinion and expression and the individual rights of the citizens. Recalling that more than €1 billion in assistance provided by the EU and its member states to the Sri Lankan people and reintroduction in 2017 of preferential access to the European single market under the GSP Plus scheme, the Council said it expects the new government to work in full compliance with its GSP Plus commitments. The government has decided to form an all-party government in the future, and preliminary discussions will be started in the next few days with the participation of party leaders. Sri Lanka's political parties and groups, religious leaders and citizens' organizations, and a number of international organizations had requested the government to establish an all-party government. The government took these decisions at the first meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers at the Prime Minister's office, chaired by President Ranil Wickremesinghe, soon after the appointment of the interim cabinet on Friday. The President told the Cabinet of Ministers that this interim cabinet has been appointed until an all-party government is formed after reaching a consensus among political party leaders. The Director General of the Road Development Authority, S. Virakon, says the daily revenue generated by highways has dropped by about 70%. He stated that this situation has been aggravated due to the ongoing fuel crisis. On an average day, the daily revenue of highways is more than 30 million rupees, adding that, however, it had fallen to 8 million these days in view of the current situation. Moreover, he mentioned that this situation has remained the same for the past 2 months. However, the highway maintenance and service work will be carried out without any problems. This news comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Continuing with the local stories, a group of more than 2,500 pilgrims on Padayatra journeying on foot from the north and east to attend the Kataragama Asala festival had entered Kumanan National Park on Saturday. Monaralgala District Secretary Gunadasa Samarasinghe told the coordinating meeting that steps would be taken to provide pilgrims facilities and protection during the journey. The meeting was presided over by the chief incumbent of Kirivehera Rajamahaviharaya, Venerable Kobbavaka Dhamminda Thera. Basnayaka Nilame Dishan Gunasekara said he expected a large crowd to attend the festival this year after an interval of about 3 years due to the corona pandemic. The National Scout Awards ceremony of the Sri Lanka Scout Association was held recently at the Goldie Sands Hotel in Negombo. These awards were presented to the adult leaders who have served the Scout movement and performed yeoman services. 450 awardees from all parts of the Sri Lanka presented themselves at the venue and received their awards at this glittering ceremony. The event became more prestigious with the presence of international leaders of the Scout movement who had braved their way to be in Sri Lanka to receive awards to honor them for their services to the movement. To end the local news, the headlines again. The President expresses concerns over diplomats' statements on removal of protesters from the Presidential Secretariat. The EU urges the new interim government to work in full compliance with GSP Plus commitments. The government to begin preliminary discussions with party leaders to form an all-party government in the future. The Ministry of Education says government and government-approved private schools in the Colombo district to resume tomorrow, limited to 3 days a week. All schools in the southern province to function on all 5 days. The Director General of the RDA says the daily revenue generated by highways down by 70%. More than 2,500 pilgrims on Padayatra journeying on foot from the north and east to attend the Kataragama Asala festival. That ends the local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
And on the main news story, the Ministry of Education says all government and government-approved private schools will reopen tomorrow and that in-person learning in schools in the Colombo district will be limited to 3 days a week until further notice. Accordingly, it said that school will function during normal school hours only on Monday, Tuesday and Thursday, while on Wednesday and Friday, students should be given learning activities to be done from home or teaching should be carried out online. It further states that the first term of the 2022 school year will be extended until September 7th, 2022, while the durations of the second and third school terms will be notified later. Meanwhile, the Education Secretary of the Southern Province stated that all government schools under the purview of the Southern Provincial Council will function on all 5 days of the week from tomorrow. That ends the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Taking a look at Watchlight, the Ceylon Petroleum Company says that no permission has been granted yet to release fuel for jerry cans or other vessels. The CPC said that it will be taking legal action against all those who attempt to collect fuel using informal methods. That ends Watchlight. We move on to the world news now. The headlines. US condemns Russian missile attack on Odessa. The Pontiff's pilgrimage of penance to Canada. Emergency declared as wildfire rages near Yosemite National Park. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has strongly condemned what Ukraine claims was a Russian missile attack on the port city of Odessa. He said in a statement on Saturday, just 24 hours after finalizing a deal to allow the resumption of Ukrainian agricultural export through the Black Sea, Russia breached its commitments by attacking the port. Kyiv and Moscow reached the deal on Friday with the help of the United Nations and Turkey. It would allow ships to come and go from the 3 Ukrainian ports, including Odessa. The Pope will make a historic visit this week to offer a formal apology on Canadian soil for the harms done by Catholic-run residential schools across the country. Pope Francis, aged 85, has called the visit a pilgrimage of penance and has said he hopes it will help heal the wrongs done in Indigenous people in Canada by the Roman Catholic Church. His itinerary includes stops in the provinces of Alberta and Quebec and the Northern Territory of Nunavut. A state of emergency has been declared in parts of California as a wildfire continues to rapidly spread near Yosemite National Park. The so-called oak fire has exploded in size since starting on Friday, but firefighters were still unable to get any of it under control for 24 hours later. More than 3,000 people have been evacuated and 10 homes destroyed. According to California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, it has burnt 11,900 acres of land, making oak fire the largest active wildfire in the United States right now. To end the world news, the headlines again. U.S. condemns Russian missile attack on Odessa. The Pontiff's pilgrimage of penance to Canada. Emergency declared as wildfire rages near Yosemite National Park. That ends the world news. Over to the development news. Sri Lanka welcomed 28,733 tourists for the first 19 days of July, bringing the total number of international visitors entering the country for the year starting January 1st to 440,110. Data from the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority showed a reduced but steady flow of tourists into the country, which indicates that despite the ongoing political and economic turmoil in the country, interest in destination Sri Lanka still remains. The UK accounted for 4,714 of the total arrivals. Ranking as the second largest contributor to tourist traffic is India, which brought in 3,375 tourists. Germany emerged as the third largest source market, accounting for 2,322 international visitors. That ends development news.
Sports news is brought to you by
Sampat Bank. We present your future.
And on sports news, it's cricket. Sri Lanka won the toss and elected to bat first in the second test against Pakistan at the Galle International Stadium. Both teams made 2 changes each. 19-year-old Dunith Velalage makes his test debut for Sri Lanka, while Asitha Fernando entered the fray in place of the injured Mahesh Theekshana. Pakistan, meanwhile, is without Shaheen Shah Afridi, who is out with a knee injury. Azhar Ali also misses out after a poor run of form. They are replaced by Nouman Ali and Fawad Alam. Pakistan enters the second test, having defeated Sri Lanka in the opening test on Wednesday. A short while ago at lunch, Sri Lanka had reached 96 for 2 with Oshada Fernando and Kusal Mendes back in the pavilion before lunch for 50 and 3 runs respectively. Skipper Dimuth Karunaratne is at the crease with 28 not out. That ends sports news. Up next is the business news.
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
With the aim of supporting the local fashion industry further progress in improving their environmental, social and governance or ESG performance in their supply chains and their operations, PricewaterhouseCoopers collaborated with the Export Development Board of Sri Lanka and the Joint Apparel Association Forum to examine the impact of ESG and its crucial nature in the apparel industry. Given this context, Sri Lanka's apparel industry has made great strides, being the world's first custom-built green apparel factory and Asia's first carbon-neutral certified factory, along with the first in the world to inculcate fair labour practices and safe working conditions in the country. That ends Business News.
Business News, sponsored by
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. Will you be the lucky winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee? 50 gold sovereigns for the top prize winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee. Scooters for the 10 second prize winners. iPhones for the 10 third prize winners. Mountain bikes for the 29 fourth prize winners. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
And on economic news, Sri Lanka's stocks fell on Friday for the first time in 6 consecutive sessions after the military and police intervention in an emergency order to clear protesters from the presidential secretariat. The main all-share price index closed 0.19% or 14.59 points down at 7,721.78. The market also saw some profit taking as well. Analysts said the market was hopeful for an all-party unity government which could boost the sentiment. The more liquid S&P SL20 index also fell, closing at 0.63% or 15.69 points lower at 2,461.98. The turnover was 866 million rupees, less than a third of this year's average daily turnover of 3.1 billion rupees. That ends economic news. And finally, we move on to the weather report. The Department of Meteorology says showers will occur at times in the Sabaragamu province and in the Nura Elia, Kandy, Gaul and Mathura districts. Several spells of showers will occur in the western and northwestern provinces. Showers or thunder showers will occur at several places elsewhere during the evening or night. Showers will continue at several places in the sea areas off the coast extending from Colombo to Mathura via Gaul. In the sea areas, showers or thunder showers may occur at a few places elsewhere during the evening or at night. That ends the weather report. And to conclude this bulletin of news, we take a look at the headlines again. The President expresses concerns over diplomats' statements on removal of protesters from the Presidential Secretariat. The EU urges the new interim government to work in full compliance with the GSP Plus commitments. The government to begin preliminary discussions with party leaders to form an all-party government in the future. The Ministry of Education says government and government-approved private schools in the Colombo district to resume tomorrow, limited to 3 days a week. All schools in the southern province to function on all 5 days. The Director General of the RDA says the daily revenue generated by highways down by 70%. More than 2,500 pilgrims on Padayatra journeying on foot from the north and east to attend the Kataragama Asala festival. On international news, US condemns Russian missile attack on Odessa. In sports news, it was cricket. Sri Lanka elects to bat first in the second test at Gaul. 19 years old, Velalage makes his test debuts. With that, we conclude this bulletin of news from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.